It was a week before Halloween, and I had just finished carving a particularly sinister-looking pumpkin. The wind outside was howling, and the full moon cast a glow over everything. I decided to take a walk through my quiet suburban neighborhood, which was known for its elaborate Halloween decorations. As I strolled down the dimly lit streets, I noticed something peculiar. One house at the end of the block had a front yard that was covered in a thick, unnatural fog. The fog seemed to seep out from the house itself, and it obscured any view of what was inside. A sign on the gate read, "Haunted House, enter if you dare." Being the adventurous type, I couldn't resist the allure of a spooky Halloween attraction. I cautiously pushed open the creaking gate and stepped into the fog. It was like entering another world. The fog was so thick that I could barely see my hand in front of my face. I stumbled through the fog, guided only by the eerie sounds that echoed around me. Ghostly moans, distant screams, and the occasional maniacal laughter filled the air. It was as if I had entered a nightmare. Suddenly, a cold hand touched my shoulder, sending shivers down my spine. I turned around to see a figure dressed in tattered rags and wearing a mask that resembled a decomposing corpse. They beckoned me to follow them deeper into the fog. With a mix of fear and curiosity, I followed the figure through a series of twists and turns. We passed through dark corridors and rooms filled with gruesome scenes. It was like being trapped in a horror movie. As we continued our journey, I couldn't help but wonder if this was all part of an elaborate Halloween prank. But the realism of the setting and the intensity of the experience made me doubt that. The line between reality and fantasy blurred as I ventured further into the unknown. Eventually, we reached a room that seemed to be the heart of the haunted house. In the center of the room was a coffin, and above it hung a chandelier with flickering candles. The figure pointed to the coffin and then slowly faded into the shadows. I approached the coffin cautiously and, with trembling hands, opened it. To my shock and horror, I found not a dummy or a prop, but a real, lifeless body. It was then that I realized I had stumbled upon something far more sinister than I had ever imagined. Panic set in as I desperately tried to find my way out of the haunted house. The fog seemed denser than ever, and the eerie sounds grew louder and more menacing. I couldn't tell if I was being pursued or if it was all in my mind. In the end, I managed to escape the fog-shrouded nightmare, but the memory of that Halloween night still haunts me to this day. I can't help but wonder if what I witnessed was a twisted reality or just an elaborate and horrifying Halloween prank. Either way, it was an experience I'll never forget, and it left me with a chilling question. What other horrors might be lurking in the shadows of our seemingly normal world? I should have been more cautious that night. The excitement of carving a pumpkin had gotten the best of me, and I didn't pay attention to the sharp knife in my hand. As I plunged the blade into the pumpkin's tough orange flesh, it slipped, and in an instant, I felt a searing pain in my hand. I dropped the knife and clutched my bleeding hand, a mixture of shock and fear coursing through me. The cut was deep, deeper than I had initially realized, and blood oozed from it. I rushed to the sink, running cold water over the wound to clean it. I hoped it was just a minor injury, but something about it felt different. The pain was sharp and intense, and I knew it wasn't a typical cut. Over the next few days, my hand began to change. The cut became inflamed, and the area around it turned a sickly shade of green. It throbbed with a constant pulsating pain, and my entire hand started to swell. I knew something was seriously wrong, but I was hesitant to seek medical attention. I thought it might heal on its own. However, the infection continued to spread. The skin around the wound became hot to the touch, and I developed a high fever. I could barely move my hand, which had now swollen to twice its normal size. It had become a grotesque and painful sight. Desperate and fearing for my life, I finally went to the emergency room. The doctors were alarmed by the condition of my hand and immediately admitted me for further examination. They began a series of tests and scans to determine the extent of the infection. After several tense days in the hospital, a specialist arrived at my bedside. She introduced herself as Dr. Margaret Landon, a researcher in infectious diseases. She had been called in to consult on my case due to the unusual nature of the infection. Dr. Landon examined my hand carefully, her face etched with concern. She explained that the infection was caused by a rare and highly aggressive bacteria, one she had encountered in her studies. This bacterium was known to produce toxins that could rapidly destroy tissue and even lead to amputation if not treated promptly and aggressively. I was terrified by the prognoses. Dr. Landon and her team worked tirelessly to devise a treatment plan. It involved a combination of powerful antibiotics and multiple surgeries to remove the infected tissue. The process was painful and grueling, but I had no choice if I wanted to save my hand and, potentially, my life. Days turned into weeks as I underwent treatment. The pain persisted, and there were moments when I doubted whether I would ever regain full use of my hand. But Dr. Landon's expertise and determination proved invaluable. Slowly but surely, the infection was brought under control, and my hand began to heal. It was a long and challenging road to recovery, but I emerged from the ordeal with my hand intact, albeit scarred and weakened. Dr. Landon's knowledge and dedication had saved me from a fate that seemed almost inevitable at the height of the infection. That Halloween night had taught me a painful lesson about the dangers of carelessness and the importance of seeking immediate medical attention when faced with a severe injury, and it had introduced me to the world of rare and dangerous bacteria. It was a night I would never forget, a night that had nearly cost me my hand, but had ultimately led me to a deeper appreciation for the fragility of life. I was hanging out with my friends at a spooky-themed party. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation as we all gathered around a bonfire, sharing scary stories and devouring candy. As the night grew darker, the host of the party, a guy named Mark, suggested we take a trip to the old abandoned mansion at the edge of town. Legend had it that the mansion was haunted and no one had dared to enter it for years. The idea was met with a mix of excitement and nervous laughter, and we decided to go for it. Armed with flashlights, we made our way through the dark woods, the trees casting eerie shadows under the glow of the moon. The mansion loomed in the distance, its broken windows and decrepit facade sending chills down our spines. As we entered the mansion, the air turned cold, and a sense of foreboding settled over us. Cobwebs covered the corners of the rooms, and the walls were adorned with faded, peeling wallpaper. It was as if time had frozen inside this forsaken place. We explored room after room, our flashlights revealing the mansion's dark secrets. In one room, we discovered old family portraits, their eyes seemingly following us as we moved. In another, we stumbled upon a dusty library filled with ancient, leather-bound books. Some of the titles were in languages we couldn't even recognize, but the creepiest discovery was yet to come. We entered what appeared to be a basement, and there, in the dim light of our flashlights, we saw a series of eerie paintings hanging on the walls. Each painting depicted a different Halloween night, with children dressed in costumes, but there was something unsettling about them. As we examined the paintings closer, we realized that the children in the paintings seemed to age from year to year, but they never aged physically. Their faces remained frozen in a perpetual state of childlike innocence, yet their eyes held a growing sense of fear and despair. Suddenly, the basement door slammed shut behind us, and we were plunged into darkness. Panic set in as we fumbled for our flashlights. When we finally managed to turn them on, we saw that the paintings had changed. The children's faces were contorted in agony, and their eyes were empty voids of darkness. We tried to open the door, but it was locked from the outside. The air grew colder, and we heard whispers and laughter that seemed to come from all around us. It was as if the very walls of the mansion were taunting us. In a desperate attempt to escape, we began tearing the paintings off the walls. As we did, the whispers grew louder, and the temperature dropped to bone-chilling levels. Finally, with one last painting removed, the door creaked open, and we bolted out of the mansion, never looking back. To this day, I can't explain what happened in that old mansion on Halloween night. All I know is that it was a night filled with unexplainable horrors and an unsettling feeling that something otherworldly had been lurking in the shadows. It's a Halloween I'll never forget, and a reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved. It was Halloween, and my friend and I had tickets to go to a show that night. Our plans were simple enough: go to the show, enjoy the nightlife of the city, and then return to our hotel room for rest. Little did we know that our Halloween night would take a turn for the worse. Upon arriving at the hotel, we were met with a strange and unsettling odor that permeated throughout the room. We exchanged puzzled glances and contacted the hotel's concierge to request a room change. However, our hopes were dashed when we were informed that all the rooms were occupied. We had some time to kill, so we searched other hotels, but all in the area were booked full, leaving us with no other option but to endure the unpleasant odor. After a long drive, I took a much-needed shower to refresh myself and get ready for the night. My friend and I had a blast at the event, immersing ourselves in the Halloween spirit. The night was filled with laughter and unforgettable moments. As we made our way back to the hotel, we couldn't help but notice the eerie atmosphere that had settled over the city, with people in costumes and the air thick with the supernatural. We entered our hotel room, hoping to find shelter from the chilly night, only to be greeted by the same foul smell that had greeted us earlier. Annoyed and disgusted, we demanded to be moved to any available room, but again the front desk said all rooms were full. They gave us a full refund for our troubles. With that, we went back up to our room. Perhaps it was the drinks we had enjoyed earlier, or maybe it was just curiosity that got the best of us, but my friend and I decided to investigate the source of the noxious smell. We began to sniff all around the room, searching for clues, and soon realized that the odor was most concentrated around the bed. We dropped down to the floor and searched under the bed, but found only dust. Then we meticulously examined each sheet, only to find that they were clean and appeared to be freshly changed. We removed the sheets and inspected the mattress. The mattress, while showing signs of wear, seemed entirely normal. We ran our hands over it, testing for anything out of the ordinary. The mattress felt firm around the edges, with a slight indentation in the center, which seemed consistent with the age of the hotel. We exchanged glances before silently agreeing to continue. We pushed the mattress off the bed. Screaming before us was the smell of death, erupting out of a hole in the fabric that lined wooden planks on the box spring. Fighting nausea, I peered into the gap, and that's when our world unraveled in sheer horror. Hidden beneath the mattress, concealed within the box spring, lay a decomposing corpse, drained of all blood, and cut into gruesome pieces with the head, eyes wide open, peering back at me. The sight was a nightmare incarnate, a grotesque realization into the horrors that have occurred within this very room that defied all reason. Terror gripped us, and we screamed in unison, unable to comprehend the gruesome discovery we had just made. I rushed to the restroom, unable to hold back the nausea that surged within me, while my friend followed, equally overcome with revulsion. With trembling hands and racing hearts, we made our way to the front desk, where we frantically reported the nightmarish scene that had unfolded in our room. The staff's faces contorted with a mixture of shock and disbelief as they listened to our ghastly tale. The thought of how many people might have unknowingly slept upon the rotting remains of another person haunted us, casting a shadow of dread over our already traumatized minds. Sleep eluded us that night, as we were tormented not only by the horrifying image we had discovered, but also by the chilling realization that we had unknowingly shared our room with death on Halloween night. It was Halloween night, and the streets were alive with the excited chatter of children in costumes, eager to fill their bags with candy. I was out trick-or-treating with a group of friends, but as the night grew late, my best friend Emma and I decided to head back to my house. With my parents still out at a Halloween party, we were looking forward to a night of horror movies and candy. It was meant to be a night of fun and mischief. However, our evening took a turn when Emma realized she had lost her cell phone during our candy hunt. Panic gnawed at her as she retraced her steps, her anxiety growing with each passing minute. In an attempt to locate the lost device, I dialed her number, expecting to hear its familiar ringtone. To our chilling dismay, a whisper, both eerie and indecipherable, seeped through the phone's speaker. Our hearts froze as the inscrutable voice murmured cryptic words. We exchanged nervous glances, convinced it was one of our friends playing a cruel Halloween prank. Attempting to unmask the prankster, we decided to check the phone's location using my computer. What we discovered left us trembling with fear. The location marker pointed directly at my house. Swallowing our unease, we convinced ourselves that it was a harmless joke. Filled with false bravado, we embarked on a thorough search of the house. We searched the first floor and the second floor, but found nothing. All that remained was the attic. We ascended the narrow attic stairs, the air growing colder and heavier with every step. My trembling hand gripped my phone, providing a false sense of comfort and safety. I turned the lights on, half expecting and half hoping one of our friends to jump out of the shadows as soon as the feeble beams of light that barely pierced the oppressive darkness gave away their hiding spot. Our nerves were on edge as we scanned the attic, the sense of foreboding intensifying with each passing moment. Though we had initially dismissed the whisper as a prank, the heavy silence and gloomy atmosphere weighed on us like a sinister presence. Emma encouraged me to search the attic thoroughly, her voice trembling with a mix of dread and determination. I reluctantly agreed. My trembling hand activated my phone's flashlight mode, sweeping the dim light through darkened spaces. The tension in the air was palpable. A suffocating dread gripped our very souls. As I inched closer to a pile of boxes of long-forgotten holiday decorations, my heart pounded in my chest. The flashlight's unsteady glow revealed nothing unusual. I hesitated, my nerves fraying, but Emma's persistence urged me forward. And then it happened. A shadowy figure hidden amidst the boxes suddenly sprang to life, brandishing a knife with deadly intent. My instincts kicked in just in time, and I evaded back, narrowly avoiding the blade's lethal swipe. My heart thundered as I stumbled backward, a blood-curdling scream escaping my lips. Emma and I raced out of the attic, our footsteps echoing through the house as we descended to the first floor. Panic and terror fueled our escape as we burst out of the front door, gasping for breath in the cold Halloween night. With trembling hands, we dialed the police and my parents, who arrived at the house soon after. The police conducted a thorough search of the house but found nothing amiss, except for Emma's shattered phone. The night's chilling events remained a haunting memory, shrouded in darkness and fear. The eerie whispering voice and the figure in the attic lingered in our nightmares, a stark reminder that the mysteries of Halloween night could be far more sinister than any ghost story. On a Halloween night several years ago, in a quiet suburban neighborhood, a chilling event unfolded that sent shivers down the spines of those who witnessed it. The night was cool and breezy, with the moon casting an eerie glow over the streets. Children in costumes roamed from house to house, their laughter filling the air. But as the night grew darker, a sense of unease settled over the neighborhood. It was during a Halloween party at the Thompsons' house that the strangeness began. The Thompsons were known for hosting the best Halloween parties in the neighborhood, and this year was no exception. The house was decked out in spooky decorations, and guests in elaborate costumes filled every room. As the evening wore on, the partygoers noticed something odd. The clocks in the house had stopped, frozen at exactly midnight. At first, it was dismissed as a Halloween prank, but as the minutes ticked by, unease turned into genuine concern. Outside, the wind picked up, and the temperature dropped to below freezing. The guests began to notice that their breath formed frosty plumes in the cold air, despite being indoors. Unnerved whispers spread among them as they tried to make sense of the bizarre occurrences. Then, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the house into darkness. Panic set in as guests stumbled over furniture and each other in the pitch blackness. Someone tried to call for help on their cell phone, but there was no signal. As they fumbled for flashlights and candles, they heard strange noises encircling them, seemingly always out of sight and out of reach. Unseen footsteps echoed through the house, and eerie whispers filled the air. It was as if they were not alone in the darkness. Terrified and disoriented, the guests decided to venture outside, hoping to find help or answers. But when they opened the front door, they were met with a sight that sent chills down their spines. The neighborhood, once alive with the sounds of children and laughter, was now eerily silent. The streets were empty, and the houses stood in darkness. It was as if time had stopped for the entire neighborhood. With a growing sense of dread, the partygoers realized that they were trapped in a nightmarish limbo, a Halloween night frozen in time. No matter how hard they tried to leave, they found themselves right back where they started. Hours turned into days, and the partygoers grew increasingly desperate. They tried everything to break free from the relentless cycle of Halloween night, but it seemed impossible. It was as if the very fabric of reality had unraveled. As the days turned into weeks, the guests slowly began to lose hope. They lived in a perpetual Halloween night, surrounded by darkness and the chilling echoes of the past, and no one from the outside world ever came to rescue them. To this day, the Thompsons' house stands as a haunting reminder of that Halloween night, a place where time itself stood still, and where those who entered were trapped in a never-ending nightmare. The neighborhood was forever changed by the inexplicable events of that fateful Halloween, a night that continues to defy explanation. I had just moved to a quiet town, hoping for a fresh start and the chance to make some friends. But as the days passed, I found myself on the receiving end of relentless bullying at my new school. Halloween was fast approaching, and the other kids decided it was the perfect time to test my worthiness as their potential friend. They came up with a sinister plan. I was to enter the abandoned and decrepit apartment complex that stood a block behind our neighborhood on Halloween night. The mere thought sent shivers down my spine, but the desperation to fit in drove me to accept the challenge. This ominous apartment complex had a dreadful reputation. Its windows were shattered, and thick vines clung to the walls. Graffiti covered every inch of its exterior, and locals whispered about it being a haven for drug users, with flickering lights seen through some of its windows on certain nights. However, I was blissfully ignorant of these chilling details as the night of Halloween drew closer. On that eerie night, my new friends and I met up in our neighborhood, all of us dressed up in costumes that concealed our true intentions. A mixture of fear and the burning desire to fit in churned within me as we walked towards the ominous building. Approaching the apartment complex, an unsettling atmosphere descended upon us. Everyone else waited outside while I made my way through the entrance. The broken glass around the front door crunched loudly under my footsteps. There was an eerie silence within the building, and the air was damp and heavy with a musty odor, making my skin crawl. In those initial moments, fear nearly overwhelmed me, but as I stood there, an odd sense of calm curiosity began to replace my dread. With cautious steps, I ventured forward and peered into a room on the left, which looked to have once been a welcoming space, but was now reduced to a makeshift campsite left behind by an unknown visitor. Continuing down the hallway on the right were the first floor rooms. The doors, some shut, some open, and a few entirely missing, lined the hallway on both sides. The numbers that once marked them had vanished, leaving only faint, ghostly shadows behind. I couldn't help but peer into the darkened rooms, where darkness and dust reside in place of occupants long past. Heading up the creaky stairs to the second floor, I encountered an even more dismal scene. The rooms here lacked doors, and the overall condition was far worse than on the first floor. A growing sense of unease gnawed at me. While exploring the hall, nearing the last set of rooms, I heard an ominous sound, an unmistakable crunching of glass nearby. A shiver ran down my spine as I turned to head back to the stairway, only to be met with the appearance of a shadowy figure blocking my path. My scream pierced the air as the figure lurched towards me, moving erratically, as if stumbling with every step. The pungent stench emanating from the figure reached my nose before the figure itself did. Panic surged through me, freezing me in place. The figure pounced on me, covering my mouth and muttering incoherently. In that terrifying moment, when my head hit the floor and the weight of the man bearing down on me, I snapped back to reality, not knowing what to do in this situation. Instinct overtook my actions, and I drove my knee with all my strength straight into the figure's groin. His grip loosened just enough for me to force his elbow away, freeing my mouth and upper body. I squirmed and squirmed until I managed to break free. Without pausing for a breath, I sprinted towards the stairway, knowing that if I hesitate for a moment, my life could be over. Stomping, stumbling footsteps echoed behind me, but I dared not look back. I didn't stop until I burst out of the building, where my friends anxiously awaited me. Without question, we all ran back to my neighborhood. As the night came to an end, I recounted the harrowing ordeal I had experienced. It was a night that would forever haunt my memory, an initiation that had thrust me into the chilling unknown. On Halloween night, I had just returned home from a festive gathering, the echoes of laughter and merriment still fresh in my mind. Little did I know that the night would soon take a harrowing turn. As I settled into my living room, the soft glow of my dimly lit lamp casting eerie shadows across the walls, An unnatural chill enveloped the room. My breath hung in the air like mist as an unsettling presence made itself known. The first sign of intrusion came as a whisper of movement in the hallway, a flicker of movement just beyond my periphery. My heart quickened as I cautiously rose from my seat, my senses on high alert. The darkness seemed to seethe with malevolence as I made my way down the dimly lit corridor. I passed the noise off as Halloween jitters. My newly built house was still settling at this time, and creaking noises were heard from time to time. I entered my kitchen for a quick glass of water and a small bite to eat. The jovial feeling from my night out being washed away with the cold water as shivers were sent down my spine, when suddenly it emerged, a monstrous creature, unlike anything I had ever seen. Its body was a grotesque amalgamation of sinewy appendages. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent fire, and its gnashing teeth gleamed with a hunger for destruction. Panic surged within me as I realized the enormity of the threat that loomed before me. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I sprang into action. The battle with the monstrous creature unfolded like a nightmarish symphony of chaos and terror, each encounter etching itself into my memory. I rushed through the doorway I entered from, looking for anything to use in defense. Our first clash occurred in the living room. The creature lunged at me with startling speed, its inhuman limbs extending like twisted tendrils. My heart raced as I stood my ground and swung a heavy candlestick, smashing it against the creature's gnashing maw. I felt the impact reverberate up my arm as the creature recoiled, hissing in pain. The skirmish then spilled into the dining room, where shattered china and splintered wood bore witness to our desperate struggle. I darted behind a toppled table, my mind racing to formulate a strategy. Wounded and bleeding from a gash across my forearm, I knew I had to stay vigilant. The creature, seemingly undeterred by its injuries, lunged again, and I narrowly dodged its slashing claws. I grabbed a broken chair leg, my fingers slick with a mix of sweat and blood, and countered with a fierce blow to its midsection. The monster howled, an unearthly wail that echoed in my ears. With each skirmish, my home became a battleground. The kitchen, the hallway, and the bedroom all bearing witness to our life and death struggle. I used whatever makeshift weapon I could find: kitchen knives, a jagged piece of glass, anything that would give me an edge. The creature's attacks grew more savage, its movements becoming increasingly unpredictable. I suffered deep gashes and bruises, each wound a testament to the fierce struggle for survival. In return, I inflicted grievous injuries upon the creature, leaving it maimed and battered. As the minutes stretched into agonizing eternity, I saw my chance. With a surge of determination, I delivered a final, resounding blow to the creature's head, the broken chair leg connecting with a sickening crunch. The monstrous intruder convulsed in its death throes, emitting a series of guttural growls before its otherworldly shriek filled the air. With trembling hands and a heart still pounding, I watched as the creature's grotesque form began to liquefy, the room filling with an acrid stench. The viscous substance evaporated into thin air, leaving only the shattered remnants of my home and the scars of a nightmarish battle. In the end, I stood victorious, though not unscathed, having faced and defeated a creature from beyond the realms of imagination. The wounds I bore would heal, but the memories of that horrifying Halloween night would forever linger, a haunting reminder of the darkness that could descend upon the most ordinary of lives. This Halloween, my friends and I had decided to explore the legendary Enigma's Grove. It was a local legend, a dark, secluded forest rumored to be inhabited by malevolent spirits, and the ghosts of witches long past. It was the perfect setting for a Halloween night. As we made our way into the woods, our flashlights cutting through the dense darkness, the chill in the air seemed to grow colder with every step. The eerie silence was broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or rustling of leaves in the wind. We had been walking for what felt like hours when we stumbled upon an old, decrepit cabin deep within the woods. The cabin was in ruins, its windows shattered and walls covered in ivy and moss. It was the kind of place that sent a shiver down your spine just by looking at it. Curiosity got the better of us, and we decided to explore the cabin's interior. The creaking floorboards beneath our feet added to the unsettling atmosphere. It was as though the very wood of the cabin groaned in protest of our presence. As we ventured further inside, we came across a room that sent a wave of unease through us. It was a room filled with old, dusty books, their pages filled with strange symbols and incantations. The air felt heavy with a sense of foreboding, and we exchanged nervous glances, but the most unsettling discovery was yet to come. In the corner of the room, we found a crude, hand-drawn map of the surrounding woods. It was covered in cryptic markings and led to a location deep within the forest. Despite our growing fear, we couldn't resist the temptation to follow the map's path. It led us deeper into the grove, where the trees seemed to close in around us, their twisted branches forming ominous shapes in the moonlight. As we reached the map's designated spot, we found a shallow, unmarked grave. The realization sent a shiver down my spine. This was no ordinary forest, and we were standing on unhallowed ground. Suddenly, a bone-chilling breeze swept through the trees, extinguishing our flashlights and plunging us into darkness. Panic set in as we fumbled for our phones, desperate to relight our way. But as the phone screens came to life, we were met with a horrifying sight. All around us, spectral figures materialized in the darkness, wailing, tormented souls with hollow eyes fixed upon us. In our terror, we stumbled back, trying to escape the encroaching spirits. But no matter how fast we ran, they were always one step behind, their ghastly hands reaching out for us. In our frantic flight, we found ourselves back at the ruined cabin, where the malevolent spirits seemed to hesitate at the threshold. It was as though the cabin offered some form of protection against the vengeful entities. We barricaded ourselves inside the cabin, our hearts pounding with fear as we watched the spectral figures outside. They pressed their twisted, ghostly faces against the shattered windows, their mournful cries filling the night. Hours passed, and the spirits eventually faded back into the darkness, leaving us shaken and traumatized. When dawn finally broke, we emerged from the cabin, determined never to return to the grove. Halloween night had shown us a side of the world we could never have imagined, a realm where the supernatural and the terrifying coexisted. It was a night we would never forget, a night when the line between the living and the dead blurred, leaving us forever changed by the horrors we had witnessed. As I stood in my kitchen, the TV murmured warnings about poisoned trick-or-treat candy and knives hidden within chocolate bars. Halloween night was upon us, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of anxiety as I prepared to welcome the townsfolk to my home. You see, for as long as I could remember, I had been known in our small town for my Halloween treats. Children and adults alike would inquire weeks in advance, asking if I'd be making my special concoctions this year. It was a tradition, and it seemed that everyone in town had grown accustomed to it. Last Halloween had been memorable, but not for the right reasons. I hadn't anticipated the overwhelming number of visitors, and my treats had run out far too soon. The disappointment on the children's faces haunted me for months afterward. This year, I was determined not to let that happen again. I stirred the bubbling cauldron on my stove. The aroma of my Halloween treats filled the air, a sweet reminder of the joy they would bring to the trick-or-treaters later that evening. I couldn't help but take a moment to savor the rich, caramel chocolate concoction I had been working on. It was almost perfect, but it was missing the most crucial ingredient. My life as a nurse on the neonatal care unit at the nearby city hospital was demanding and hectic, leaving me little time for my culinary passion. But every now and then, when the stars aligned and I found a precious moment of solitude, I would sneak away to acquire the secret ingredient. I savored the sweet mixture on my tongue, the flavors dancing in harmony. With a satisfied smile, I turned off the heat and headed down to the basement, a place that remained cool, dark, and damp, the perfect environment to preserve the secret ingredient. Descending the creaky wooden stairs, I reached the basement's dimly lit interior. My steps echoed softly against the cold concrete floor as I made my way to the corner of the room. There, concealed within a weathered wooden crate, lay the ingredient I treasured most. Still sealed in its container, I picked up a knife kept nearby. I then reached down and grabbed the resting item, a being once abandoned and forsaken at the hospital, soon to be loved by so many. The vessel housing the ingredient was a baby, whose parents had left it behind soon after giving birth to it. Fed and nurtured to a minimum standard, the container was solely alive for this night. I took a deep breath and proceeded to shout, filling the room with loud screams and cries from the being beneath me. After a few minutes of ceaseless shrieks, the room fell silent, and I had obtained enough of the ingredient to store for the next year. Back in the kitchen, I carefully poured the deep red liquid into the caramel chocolate mixture, stirring it in with a sense of reverence. The secret ingredient had been added, infusing the treats with its unparalleled flavor. The candies were now complete, and I couldn't wait to share them with the townsfolk, who would soon grace my doorstep. Halloween was a time for tradition, and this year I was determined to make it unforgettable. It was Halloween night. I was in middle school, and two friends of mine and I embraced the darkness, fully immersed in our chosen disguises. One dressed as a bunny hopped along with playful agility, its fluffy tail twitching with every bound. Another, a witch, adorned in tattered robes, wielded a gnarled stick like a true sorceress, and I, a zombie, shuffled along with a haunting gait, arms outstretched, and face painted in grotesque decay. Our spirits were unchained as we ventured further into the night, reveling in the unsettling atmosphere around us. We targeted the younger children first, the bunny crouching low behind a tree, waiting for an unsuspecting victim to pass. With a sudden leap, it pounced, causing shrieks from our younger prey. The witch, her pointy hat casting a sinister shadow, cackled as she approached the homes of unsuspecting homeowners. At each doorbell's ring, she would play eerie sounds from her hidden speaker, startling those who dared open the door for trick-or-treaters. Their startled gasps and nervous chuckles fueled our delight, but perhaps our most devious act was my smashing of jack-o'-lanterns. I'd sneak up to porches, my footsteps barely audible, and with a quick, decisive stomp, I'd obliterate the carefully carved pumpkins. The sound of shattering glass and splintering pumpkin flesh echoed in the night, leaving a trail of destruction in my wake. As we reveled in our chaotic spree of scares and destruction, the moon cast long, eerie shadows that danced around us, adding to the surreal atmosphere of the night. We were young and intoxicated with the thrill of the forbidden, heedless of the consequences our actions might bring. Laughter and ghoulish pranks echoed through the night as we approached the last house at the end of the road, with its unlit exterior and take-only-one sign in an empty bowl. The grins that had adorned our faces slowly faded, replaced by a growing sense of infuriation as we approached the door of that darkened house. Nature urged us to ring the doorbell. No answer. We knocked hard on the door, and it creaked open just a crack. The three of us exchanged glances, and then pushed the door all the way open. The room beyond was shrouded in darkness, illuminated only by the feeble light spilling in from the open door. There, in the far corner of the barren room, we saw a figure. It was crouched down, its gaze fixed on the corner, and it exuded an unsettling aura. The figure's face slowly turned toward us, revealing a grin that stretched impossibly wide, its lips cracked and oozing a black, viscous substance. Its skin bore scabbed wounds from relentless picking, and its yellow eyes were wide open and deeply sunken, encircled by dark rings. We stood frozen in fear as the figure began to rise, never altering its unnerving grin. It seemed to defy the laws of nature, its body contorting in unnatural ways as it moved with an alarming speed toward us. Then, the figure shrieked, a sound that immediately awoke us from our trance. With each step, it came closer, its long, spindly arms outstretched, and its bare feet making soft, almost splatter noises as they touched the floor. Panic surged through us, and we screamed in terror, turning to flee from the nightmare. We sprinted back to the safety of our own homes, leaving behind the house of horrors and the night that had taken a sinister turn. As we huddled in our beds, our hearts racing, we couldn't shake the image of that figure with its grotesque grin and yellow eyes. The once playful night had become a harsh reality, a reminder that on Halloween, odd and terrifying things can indeed happen. It was Halloween night. I was in middle school, and two friends of mine, and I embraced the darkness, fully immersed in our chosen disguises. One, dressed as a bunny, hopped along with playful agility, its fluffy tail twitching with every bound. Another, a witch, adorned in tattered robes, wielded a gnarled stick like a true sorceress, and I, a zombie, shuffled along with a haunting gait, arms outstretched, and face painted in grotesque decay. Our spirits were unchained as we ventured further into the night, reveling in the unsettling atmosphere around us. We targeted the younger children first, the bunny crouching low behind a tree, waiting for an unsuspecting victim to pass. With a sudden leap, it pounced, causing shrieks from our younger prey. The witch, her pointy hat casting a sinister shadow, cackled as she approached the homes of unsuspecting homeowners. At each doorbell's ring, she would play eerie sounds from her hidden speaker, startling those who dared open the door for trick-or-treaters. Their startled gasps and nervous chuckles fueled our delight, but perhaps our most devious act was my smashing of jack-o'-lanterns. I'd sneak up to porches, my footsteps barely audible, and with a quick, decisive stomp, I'd obliterate the carefully carved pumpkins. The sound of shattering glass and splintering pumpkin flesh echoed in the night, leaving a trail of destruction in my wake. As we reveled in our chaotic spree of scares and destruction, the moon cast long, eerie shadows that danced around us, adding to the surreal atmosphere of the night. We were young and intoxicated with the thrill of the forbidden, heedless of the consequences our actions might bring. Laughter and ghoulish pranks echoed through the night as we approached the last house at the end of the road, with its unlit exterior and take-only-one sign in an empty bowl. The grins that had adorned our faces slowly faded, replaced by a growing sense of infuriation as we approached the door of that darkened house. Nature urged us to ring the doorbell. No answer. We knocked hard on the door, and it creaked open just a crack. The three of us exchanged glances, and then pushed the door all the way open. The room beyond was shrouded in darkness, illuminated only by the feeble light spilling in from the open door. There, in the far corner of the barren room, we saw a figure. It was crouched down, its gaze fixed on the corner, and it exuded an unsettling aura. The figure's face slowly turned toward us, revealing a grin that stretched impossibly wide, its lips cracked and oozing a black, viscous substance. Its skin bore scabbed wounds from relentless picking, and its yellow eyes were wide open and deeply sunken, encircled by dark rings. We stood frozen in fear as the figure began to rise, never altering its unnerving grin. It seemed to defy the laws of nature, its body contorting in unnatural ways as it moved with an alarming speed toward us. Then, the figure shrieked, a sound that immediately awoke us from our trance. With each step, it came closer, its long, spindly arms outstretched, and its bare feet making soft, almost splatter noises as they touched the floor. Panic surged through us, and we screamed in terror, turning to flee from the nightmare. We sprinted back to the safety of our own homes, leaving behind the house of horrors and the night that had taken a sinister turn. As we huddled in our beds, our hearts racing, we couldn't shake the image of that figure with its grotesque grin and yellow eyes. The once playful night had become a harsh reality, a reminder that on Halloween, odd and terrifying things can indeed happen.